This week's healthy habit focus is how to read food labels and how to use that information to best inform your nutrition and health decisions. Now, I have personally been reading food labels since I was 9 years old for my type 1 diabetes, and I had to assess the carb amount and run a math equation every time I would eat to guide my insulin dose. This has been an integral part of eating for me since I was just 9 years old, and it actually took a while for me to realize that not everyone examines the food label before eating, and there's a ton of valuable information here beyond just carbs and calculating insulin needs. The information on a food label can dramatically change how you support your body. This was the best habit to focus on for where we're at in our healthy habits journey to help guide your food choices so that you can make the most informed decision for your health and physiology. So, why do food labels matter? It's not the food label per se, as much as it's the information that's present on the nutrition facts panel. This will help us understand what a food will do once it's inside of your body after you consume it. And this isn't necessarily about labeling a food as good or bad. It's about understanding how that food is going to influence your physiology and then making the most informed decision for your health. Let's start with the component that most people are familiar with, the calorie. This is probably what most people default to. We hear, counting calories. If you burn more than you consume, you'll lose weight. But it goes much further than just the calorie itself. And that's what the rest of the information on the label can provide us. So the calorie itself is simply a measure of energy. This calculation determines how much energy in the form of joules will increase the temperature of a system by 1 degree. And that is why we say we burn calories. What they do in the body is simply act as fuel for your cells. Think of a calorie as coal that you would put in a fire. The calorie itself is not enough to look at. Now, it might be true that if you put yourself in a caloric deficit that you will lose weight. If you want to lose weight effectively and keep it off and make this weight sustainable long term, you need to understand more than just the calorie itself. We'll break this down in just a moment, but before we get there, we need to understand why the calorie matters in the context of our biology. Most of us are familiar with our metabolic rate. This is the amount of energy in calories that your body burns at rest. You have a couple of different forms. You have your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories your body burns just running its normal processes, sleeping, detoxing, digesting food, beating your heart, and breathing. On top of that, you have your total daily energy expenditure. This includes movement that you do voluntarily throughout the day, whether you're sitting at a desk most of the day or you go do an intense workout. There will be variabilities in the amount of calories that burn depending on your level of activities throughout the day. A very common equation we hear in the weight loss and nutrition space is that 1 pound of fat on your body is equal to 3,500 calories. And so if you burn 3,500 calories, you should lose 1 pound of fat. Now, this is a very oversimplified explanation of how the body burns fat, but it is useful for providing the context of understanding how caloric deficit can promote weight loss or how caloric excess can encourage weight gain. While a caloric deficit will result in weight loss, if your deficit is not properly balanced, you will end up losing weight in places that you don't want to lose weight, like lean body mass. People who go on a caloric restrictive diet, 1/3 of the weight that they lose is from lean body mass. Once you start eating sufficient calories, that weight tends to come right back on. There is a way to balance the composition of the calorie to promote healthy and sustainable weight loss as opposed to chasing calories. Now, you can calculate your metabolic rate, and this is a great place to start. I would encourage most people to do that. Just plug in your weight in pounds, your height in inches, and your age. Whether you're a man or a woman, use the appropriate equations, and this will give you an estimate of about how many calories your body is burning on a daily basis. This is your basal metabolic rate. If you wear a smartwatch, that will track calories that you can estimate in addition to your basal metabolic rate that you burn collectively. This is a great place to start with understanding how many calories you should eat. Next, we're going to dive into how to compose those calories and where they should be coming from so that your weight loss or weight maintenance is sustainable and healthy and you're fueling your body appropriately. Macronutrients. These are what constitute a calorie. When you eat energy in the form of a calorie, we can break that down into three categories. We have fats, carbs, and proteins. It's important to understand this in terms of the calories that you're eating because each of them will provide a different benefit, action, or function in the body. The fats, for example, they will bring 9 calories per gram. So for every 1 gram of fat, you'll have 9 calories. For every 1 gram of carbs that you eat, you'll get 4 calories. And for every 1 gram of protein, you'll also get 4 calories. Carbs and proteins are equal in their caloric content, but that does not mean they are equal in function and what they do in your body. So this is not something we can substitute one for one. We want to be careful about this stacking of macronutrients with each meal. Carbs and fats are a fuel source for your cells. Your body will take these, send them to the mitochondria, and use them to make energy. It's how you fuel your body. This is the coal that is going into the fire. Protein, on the other hand, is a building block. It's essential, and there is a threshold for optimal health of protein consumption. If you're eating adequate calories for your metabolic rate or even a caloric deficit, but most of those calories are coming from fats and carbs, you will not experience the same benefits or weight loss effects as you would if you were consuming consistent protein. We need to be careful about the way we build our calories in our food. And there are a few key strategies that you can implement to help you do just that. So we're going to take a look at a nutrition facts panel and go through each of these macronutrients and understand how they constitute a calorie and why what we're looking at is more important than the total caloric intake itself. Now, this is for 100 grams of almonds, and we can see it's going to bring along 51 grams of fat. If we multiply that times 9, we're getting 459 calories from fat. These almonds will also bring along 20 grams of carbs. So doing the math, we can see another 80 calories from carbohydrates. And we have 21 grams of protein in these almonds, which is another 84 calories. Together, these equal 623 total calories coming from the fats, carbs, and proteins in the foods. On a high level, this is the number one place to assess on the food label. And I'll give you some key strategies in the next few slides on how to do this. You'll also notice that these categories are broken down further to saturated fats, trans fats, fibers, and sugars. This is also important, but if you apply these next tips and strategies on these high-level ratios of carbs, proteins, and fats, you will drastically improve your food choices and your macronutrient distribution to better support your health. So the first rule at every meal, anytime you eat anything, is the carb to protein ratio. Your foods and meals should have 1 gram of protein for every 1 gram of carbs that you eat. This will do several things for your health. It will stabilize your blood sugar, promote healthy weight maintenance, and prevent overeating carbs. Now, we also have to consider where these carbs come from. Fiber is an excellent source of carbohydrates. They technically don't constitute total carbs if they're insoluble fiber, but that's getting too nuanced for now. All you really need to know is the balance between carbs and protein is going to be the number one strategy to look at here when determining, are these calories worth eating? The reason this is so important is because most people underconsume protein in general. The ideal amount of protein is about 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So, a 130-pound woman who's about 5'6" should probably be consuming anywhere from 120 to 130 grams of protein each day. At a minimum, 100 would be the goal. If you aim for your protein target and you align your carb to protein ratio 1 to 1, you'll end up eating about the same amount of calories from carbs. And this is very important because the average human body can only burn about 130 grams of carbs per day. That is just the metabolic capability that your body has for managing carbs. To put that into context, the average American consumes about 300 grams of carbs per day. That's over double what your body can manage. So if we start with just this simple 1 to 1 ratio, this will be an excellent way to ensure you're eating balanced caloric density to support health and healing. Protein is also the most satiating nutrient. So it's going to be very hard to eat that much protein or more each day. And if you're not allowing your carb intake to exceed your protein intake, then you won't overeat carbs, which can lead to things like metabolic imbalances, fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, and eventually type 2 diabetes. So when this ratio does not apply, if added sugars are going to sabotage your efforts, go ahead and skip it. We can see here the total amount of carbs on this food is 22 grams. Now, this 1 to 1 ratio doesn't always have to be from the same food. You could have some berries, which are higher in carb, but very low in protein, and you could pair that with a protein shake or Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. So pairing carbs with an adequate protein source is a useful strategy. What we don't want to do is pair empty carbs with a protein source. So a rule of thumb, if the carbs are made up of more than 5 grams of added sugar, skip that food, regardless of the protein content. So even if this here said it had 40 grams of protein, it still would not be considered a clean, healthy food because of all of this added sugar. Many foods are labeled as healthy or high protein, or they have green labels for marketing purposes. And it's simply because they have a high protein content. But many food companies will add tons of added sugar or worse, high fructose corn syrup to make that high protein food tasty, and that will sabotage your efforts. So always default to that 1 to 1 for carbs to protein, and then look at the amount of added sugars present in that food. If it's more than 5, put it back on the shelf. And then we have fats. Now, if you go back to the metabolic equation on one of the earlier slides and calculate your metabolic rate plus your energy expenditure for the day, and then you eat calories following the 1 to 1 carb to protein ratio, you can work backwards to determine how many fats you should eat. So if you start with your weight and you are going to eat 130 grams of protein per day, that means you will also be eating 130 grams of carbs per day. This equates to 1,040 calories. Now, let's say your goal is to eat 1,700 calories per day. You would simply subtract 1,040 from 1,700 to get 660. Divide that by 9, and that totals 73 grams of fat per day. You can eat more protein if you prefer, which would not hurt anything, and fewer fats. If your focus is balancing out those first 2 macros, fats will just fall in line. The next thing we want to take a look at on food labels is the ingredient list and what's acceptable versus excessive. The most important thing to look at on the ingredient list are the first 3. These ingredients matter the most. The ingredients of a product are listed in the order of quantity that they're present in the food. So you're going to have the most of the first 3 ingredients in there. Ideally, you want these to be fresh, whole foods. If you flip over a label and you see that the first three ingredients is something like enriched wheat flour, sugar, and high fructose corn syrup, leave it on the shelf. If your first three ingredients are something like whole grains or a protein source and some spices or a vegetable, this is a good food. The further down you go, you'll get into some additives like fillers, flow agents, emulsifiers, flavors, colors. Some of these things are going to be necessary. So we don't need to be neurotic and try to avoid anything that's not a real food. But a good rule of thumb is that if it contains more than 3 to 5 words that you don't recognize, it's no longer a real food. Your ingredient list will tell you a lot. Ingredients that contain commas, random letters, and numbers are not foods, they are chemicals. So we can see here on this food list, there are tons of unnecessary fake foods or chemicals that are added to this food. You might have heard this saying before. If your grandmother wouldn't recognize it, don't eat it. Now let's talk about how to use this in real life. This was a lot of information, but there are 3 key applications that will help you align your calories to best support your physiology. Number 1, make sure it's got that balanced carb to protein ratio. Is that ratio 1 to 1? If not, and this is a fiber-rich whole food, something like nut seeds, legumes, berries, even some other fruits like apples or pears, what's a protein source that you could pair with it? Maybe some uncured lunch meat or Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. Number 2, does it have excess added sugar? Does it contain more than 5 grams of added sugar as part of those carbohydrates? Now, if the carb content in the food is slightly higher than protein, but it's mostly from fiber, which would also be listed on the label, and not from added sugars, you're in the clear. You don't need to chase down 2 or 3 or 5 grams of protein if most of these are coming from fiber, because you're not actually going to digest those anyway. They stay in the gut and feed your gut microbes. So it doesn't actually constitute a carb. But if most of that is from added sugars, that is a carb source worth leaving on the shelf. Lastly, is it mostly real ingredients on the label? Are the first 3 ingredients real food? Do you recognize the name of the other ingredients or the inactive ingredients that are further down the list? If the answer is no to either of those questions, this is a chemical, it's not a food. So leave it on the shelf. These practices are about supporting your physiology and helping you make an informed decision. This is not about perfection. I will tell you, sometimes I have a craving for brownies. Brownies are my weakness. And all it takes for me, I simply flip over the box and read the food label. The amount of carbs and the first 3 ingredients are enough to completely shut down that craving. Knowing this information and understanding how these foods show up in our body and in our physiology is empowering enough to help you make the best choice for your health. This is a very helpful skill and habit to have when you're in the grocery store trying to decide what should I eat. This skill can help you determine the best choice for your health. And that is it on reading food labels. I hope this is helpful. I would love to hear how your journey goes, and I will see you in the group chat.